Okay, thank you, Session Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so my name is Jabulani Mavudze from Zimbabwe, and I think I will use the big screen. Yeah, so I'm going to walk you through what we are learning from a pilot project that we are implementing in Zimbabwe, where we introduced the Dapivirine ring among the adolescent girls and young women in 9 locations in the country of Zimbabwe. So just an overview of what this is going to cover: the background, study objectives, methods, what are we already learning from this pilot in terms of acceptability, the sero-conversion, and then we talk about the conclusion. So in terms of the background, I think basically overall in terms of what has been said since morning, we are seeing that according to that impact assessment, approximately 31,000 each year in Zimbabwe, they acquire HIV. And we are seeing that the adolescent girls and the young women are disproportionately affected compared to the male counterparts. And we are seeing those figures to explain that. And I'm also showing that graph, which is on the right. What we are showing there is in terms of PrEP continuation, by population category, we are seeing the red line, which is sitting at the bottom, and that's the adolescent girls and the young women. And the other lines are the other populations. So already in terms of continuation, there's also a problem, a challenge with this particular population group. And maybe just to talk a bit about what is this Dapivirine ring. I always say it's a ring, so it's a circle in shape, which is a silicone ring which was developed by IPM. And the ring is inserted in the female organ for 28 days. And once it's inserted, it delivers the Dapivirine substance into the tissues of the female organ. And in terms of efficacy, literature is showing that it's around 35%. And I think in terms of that issue of efficacy, what we are learning as we are implementing this project, there are issues with the service providers in terms of hesitance, especially around talking about this particular product because of those efficacy issues. So in Zimbabwe, this product was approved by the Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe in July 2021. So for this particular pilot project, the overall objective was to understand the acceptability and the feasibility of introducing the DPV-R as a prevention method among the adolescent girls and young women in Zimbabwe particularly. And we were pursuing 4 specific objectives. One, obviously, the acceptability. And on acceptability, we were comparing the ring and the oral PrEP among this particular population. And we were also measuring the effectiveness of the product in terms of the sero-conversions. So I will focus on the first 2 objectives, and the other 2, number 3 and number 4, it's a different conversation. So where was this implemented? I don't expect you to know those geographies, but for purposes of illustration, I'm just showing that map of Zimbabwe. So we implemented this pilot project in 9 districts where we are implementing, I'm sure, the famous DREAMS project, which is a preventative intervention targeting adolescent girls and young women. So in terms of the sample size that we wanted to recruit for this particular study, we targeted to recruit 1,100 adolescent girls and young women. And in terms of the statistical assumptions that we used statistical power of 80%, a significance level of 5%, the confidence interval of a confidence level of 95%. And we assumed that in terms of acceptability, probably those who are going to be offered the option to choose oral PrEP or the ring, 50% are going to opt for the ring. And in terms of the design effect, we used 2, and we assumed that in terms of attrition, because the girls are being followed up for the next 6 months once they are recruited, and we assumed that by the 60th month, 30% of these recruited girls potentially would have dropped from the study. And we are showing the flow in terms of how we recruited these participants. In terms of the inclusion criteria, somebody had to be HIV negative, and they had to be a female, aged 18 to 25 years, and we were excluding people that were pregnant, somebody who is not willing to use the ring. And again, for those who opted for the ring, they were supposed to commit to be on the study for the next 6 months. Of course, at the end point, those who were willing to then drop, it was still acceptable for them to drop. But from the beginning, we wanted somebody to know that they are going to be on this study for the next 6 months. So what are we already seeing from this pilot? And this graphic is basically showing us in terms of the geographies that we are showing there. Again, I don't expect you to know those locations, but for purposes of illustration, the blue bar is showing what we intended to recruit in terms of the number of girls, and the gold bar is the actual number of girls that were recruited in the study. One thing or something of interest, the first location, which is Bulawayo, that is purely an urban setting. And the third location, which is Gweru, is also an urban setting. And what we learned from that, the other 3 are purely rural areas. And what we are learning from that graph is that we were not able to meet our recruitment target in the urban areas, but we were able to meet or exceed our targets in the rural areas in terms of those who were opting for the ring compared to the oral PrEP. There we are just showing the demographic characteristics of the individuals that were enrolled in the study. I will not go through that. So what are we also seeing from the data in terms of uptake for the ring compared to oral PrEP? So what was happening, somebody would come for a service, then if they test negative and they are willing to be on the PrEP, they were given 2 options, either the oral or the ring option, then they choose. And what we are showing there in those 5 locations, what is critical to pay attention on is the setting, which is urban and rural. And as we can see in terms of percentage who accepted to take up the ring option, the urban communities, we had 52% in the first location called Bulawayo. We also have 67% in the second urban community, which is Gweru. But in all the rural settings, the option for the ring was very high. And as we look at the confidence intervals, we see that there's non-overlapping between the urban and the rural communities, which means there's a statistical significance in terms of the setting. People in the rural areas are more likely to choose the ring compared to their counterparts in the urban areas. And then coming to continuation, those who then enroll on the ring and also their colleagues that enrolled on the oral prep, that graph, the red line is showing us that we observed a higher continuation rate among adolescent girls who opted for the ring compared to their counterparts who opted for the oral prep, which is that blue line graph below. And on the right panel, we are showing some of the effects why some of the adolescent girls opted out along the study. Coming to the core of this presentation, which is the seroconversion. Looking at the first row, which is about the ring, out of the 1,172 adolescent girls that we followed up after initiating them on the ring, 8 of them seroconverted. And proportionally, that is 0.68%. And the counterparts who opted for the oral prep, out of the 338, 1 seroconverted, which is 0.3%. But when we look at those two figures, in terms of the confidence intervals, they are actually overlapping, meaning to say there's no statistical significance, really to say because somebody was on the ring, so they were more likely to seroconvert. It's just by chance. We were also administering another product, event-driven PrEP, which is PrEP 211. Again, in terms of the seroconversions, 2 out of the 332 seroconverted, which is 0.4%. Again, in terms of the confidence intervals, we are also seeing that for those 3 products, they are all overlapping, meaning to say these are happening by chance and not because somebody is on a particular oral type. And looking at the incidence rate, again, we see the confidence intervals, they are overlapping, implying that there is no statistical significance in terms of whether somebody is on the ring, on event PrEP, or oral PrEP. We try to look at the data to say, by month on PrEP, are we seeing any statistical significance to say somebody who was on PrEP for 1 month, they were more likely to seroconvert, or is somebody 2 months later or 6 months later? What we are seeing there, out of the 8, the majority of them, they seroconverted within the first month of being introduced to the ring. On the second month, there was only 1. Third month, there was 1 to make that 8. So from month 4, 5, 6, going forward, we didn't see any seroconversions. But again, looking at the confidence intervals, they are overlapping, meaning to say it's just by chance that somebody converted in month 1 or month 2 or month 3. It's not because it was month 1, then ideally what it means, you are more likely to seroconvert. Then by age, again, we are seeing that the confidence intervals, they are overlapping, meaning to say there is no statistical significance. It's not because we are younger and we are more likely to seroconvert when you are on the ring. By setting, in terms of rural or urban, again, we saw the same pattern. It's not statistically significant. This slide, we are trying to understand those 8 clients or adolescent girls who seroconverted. What is the issue? So 5 of them, they indicated that really they had the ring inserted, but they seroconverted. Then the other client indicated that at some point they had to remove the ring because their sexual partner was coming home from the neighboring country and they were afraid of violence. So they removed the ring. The other one also indicated that actually they missed the replacement for the ring, and during that time they didn't have the ring. Potentially that's when they contracted HIV. So in conclusion, What we are learning from this information that I presented, because broadly, because of the non-overlapping confidence intervals, we believe that the ring is equally effective when we compare it to other PrEP products, which is the oral PrEP specifically. We also saw high acceptance rate, higher continuation rate among the ring users compared to oral users, and we believe we have an option to scale up this product. And we see that majority of the conversions, seroconversions, happened in month 1. Possibly these clients, they were in the window period because we didn't see that statistical significance. So possibly they were within the window period. And we learned that in terms of self-administration of that ring, most of the participants were saying it was very easy to do so. Actually, 97% of them, they said they could easily insert the ring on their own. So in terms of some of the, where did it go? So I wanted to conclude by saying the last point is about the documented, I think, efficacy of the product. What we are seeing is there is really some hesitance among the service providers because of that. But as we were moving from time to time, as we implement the project, we were learning that this was going down. They were becoming more and more comfortable with the product. And I think it's a matter of time we'll be able to see more service providers being comfortable with the product. I think that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you.